Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of The Human Side of Marketing. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, here, the host, as always, the one and only famous Chris Hockwell.
Hey, I guess you're
I mean,
you want to be, right?
I think your fame is growing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I've heard more people saying, I was checking out your services, and I jumped on your podcast and listened to you a little bit, and realized maybe this guy actually does know what he's talking about. So,
have people stopped you in Costco yet to ask for your autograph? You're like, hey, excuse me, can you sign my shirt, or sign my flat of muffins?
No, because you have a mask on. I'm sure that's the reason.
Yeah. Otherwise, maybe.
That's the reason why they're like, looks like the guy from The Human Side of Marketing, but maybe not.
Probably not. I don't want to risk it. Yeah, I hear that. So what's our topic today?
We're talking about your obituary, Chris.
Ooh, so dark.
I know, right? Well, last time in episode 55, we talked about the story that we're living. Whose story are you living? Do you have a story that you have kind of mapped out for your life? And one of those little tiny elements that we barely touched on was starting with the end in mind.
Yeah.
I think that to understand your life story, you have to start with the end in mind. And so that starts with your obituary.
So I've tried exercises like this before where I write my obituary. Mm-hmm. They always, in the past, have felt intellectual to me, and I haven't really been able to find an emotional connection to it. So, like, maybe you can coach me up in this episode, or just tell me about your own experiences. But, like, how do we start to find an inroad to something that actually feels good and congruent? And
yeah, so how many times?
I don't know my obituary. I don't know what to say about my life when I'm dead. Like,
yeah,
I haven't lived it yet.
Right. I think it starts with obviously we don't know the days that we have on this planet, right? But where I like to start and how I coach people through this is starting with an age. Like, what age do you think you'll live to? Okay.
That's scary.
So,
it's like,
right?
Yikes.
I mean, it could be like, oh, God's like, oh, you're going to live till this age, and then you walk outside and get hit by a bus. Right. You can't think of that in this context, right? So if we're starting with the end in mind, really this comes from, obviously we talk about story all the time. We talk about, how movies are just so, when you're watching the right kind of movie with a well-written script, or reading a book with a well-written story or storyline, those authors always started with the end of the story and worked backwards, right? So I think for a life plan and for your life story to work, you have to start with the end in mind. So let's start with age, right? So let's say you're going to die at age 82, right? And that means
let's make it a little higher. Let's make it like 98.
98. Okay, 98.
98.
Right.
Okay.
So if you're in, I'm not going to be able to do math fast here, but if you're in your kind of mid 40s, what is that? Another 40 some years.
Halfway there. We're almost halfway there.
You're only halfway there, right? And so when you start with the end in mind, then you start kind of reverse engineering that is who's with you on that journey, right? And then what are these people? So your obituary is written by somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else's take on who you were. So what's kind of the legacy that you want to leave behind, and what are these people seeing the type of person that you're being? And here's another thing too. This is a weird exercise. It's a totally weird exercise. And you know what, honestly, I bet the obituary that you wrote when you were kind of going through this exercise in the past, you looked at it a few days later and went, that's dumb. Right? But
I don't remember what I wrote, actually. I don't even remember.
Yeah, right. But honestly, this is really just kind of an exercise in a mindset that there's a bigger story than just tomorrow, or there's a bigger story than just next week, or there's a bigger story than I just want to get my kids through high school, right? Or there's a bigger story than I just want to, get to the end of this pandemic, right? And so when you start with kind of what age are you going to be when you die, and start reverse engineering that to the type of person that you want to be when it's all said and done, I think that by the time you're 98, is that what you said, 98?
Yeah, 98, yeah.
There's 98. You look at people who are like, I listened, Jerry Seinfeld had a really funny stand-up routine that he did, or a special that he did on Netflix. And he said, because he's like in his early 70s now, I think, believe it or not.
Seinfeld?
Yeah. And late 60s, early 70s. Wow. Yeah, he's an older dude. Wow. And so he said that, now that I'm in my early 70s, when people ask me to do something, I don't want to do it. I turn around and be like, I'm not doing that. And then he's like, when you get into your 80s, you don't even have to say anything anymore. You just kind of wave your arm like, I'm not doing that. And so it's funny when you think about yourself in that age. We always you look at people who are of that, elder, and they don't care, right?
Yeah.
The important, they're only caring about the important things, right? So I think by starting with like, who are you at 80, who 90, you're like, I'm not worried about like, standing out at this networking event, or I'm not worried about being, so polished and perfect in this scenario and that scenario. I'm worried about the people who are around me and the people who love me and the people who know that I love them.
Yeah.
And what I've been able to build or what I've been able to leave behind. And so when you start thinking about that kind of in reverse order, some of those things that, are really important to us now, maybe might not necessarily be as important. And so I think when you start re-engineering your life, you're focusing on those more important things. And that can start with, how old am I going to be when I die? What are people going to say about me when I'm gone? And then when you have that mindset, then it allows you to start thinking about, okay, if that's the person that I want people to see when I'm gone, or remember when I'm gone, who do I need to be today? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I when I do some of the work that I do, I'm often talking about your life's work. Like, what's the body of work? And it's famous in business that so many times we can get focused on a year or 2 years out. But I'm like, look, what does it look like 30 to 40 years out? And just the simple shifting of perspective to like, oh, like I could be doing this for 30 to 40 years. Like, that just kind of, one, it creates a lot of patience and just, oh, okay. And it also expands, like, I could get a lot done in 30 to 40 years. If we don't ever think that far down the road, then we're always just squeezed by the next year or two. And we're like always in this urgent pattern of trying to get everything done. But you often underestimate what you can get done.
Yeah.
And by just focusing on 1 to 2 year ahead versus going 30 to 40 years. And I think you start to, going back to last episode, you start to dream into better stories.
Yeah.
And I think you could write a better obituary if you could get to that perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned urgency, and I think that really, when you go through this process, it creates a sense of urgency because you only have a finite number of days left.
Right.
Right? You said, if I only have this number of days left, there's a sense of urgency to what I think is focus on the right things.
Yeah, right.
Some of the urgency that we feel on our day-to-day basis is we're focused on the wrong things. And a sense of urgency for something you desire is a lot more fun than a sense of urgency trying to deal with something that is, a pain in your neck, right? And so I think urgency is a good thing, but I think some of the urgency in our life is just trying to keep all the plates spinning, or make sure that it all doesn't fall and crash. It's this urgency, but really what it is, it's your reactionary, because they've never taken the time to say, we talked a couple episodes ago about the power of saying no. Mm-hmm. This is another big thing, is when you know what your destination is, you say no to stuff because you're like, I've got this story, I got stuff I got to get done. I don't have time to do that.
Right.
And you look at these people, like the famous people, like a Tony Robbins, or Michael Jordan, or people who have accomplished so much, and you hear their story, and they were always like, from a very young age, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And they weren't messing around and doing stuff that wasn't associated with that goal in mind.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think when other people were running around with their hair on fire, they're like, I'm totally focused because I wasn't distracted by those things. Their urgency, another thing we talked about with the last episode, if you don't know your story, the urgency that you're feeling is probably somebody else's values and goals.
Right.
Of what they're trying to get to be, when their obituary is written.
So what's the question that's coming up from me right now is like, what's in this for me? If I write my obituary, like, why am I doing that? What do I get out of that exercise?
I think it gives you a sense of value. Also, because when you realize that you're a valuable piece, it's really, for me anyway, it comes to those who are around you, your family, your staff. Let's say you own a business.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a part of let's say your church or some other group that's very important to you, or you want to leave a legacy for a certain people. Maybe you've got your desire is, you know, when it's all said and done, I want to have made an impact in Rwanda, or, you know, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so when you realize that your value or you're valuable to see for these other people to succeed, or you're valuable because other people who are with you on the journey need you to be there. I think that sense of purpose is something that's important to get you out of bed every day. You know, and then also I think that Gary Vee always says, basically, I don't know the exact phrase, but basically he's always saying, you got time, right? And if you don't know Gary Vee, he's a kind of a marketing guru, but when people come to him, they're like, you know, Gary, you're so successful. I want to be successful. How do I be successful? I feel like I've wasted so much time. And he's like, well, how old are you? Oh, I'm 30. He's like, dude, you got plenty of time left. You got like 10 more years of making wrong decisions before it really starts to matter, you know? And so realizing another thing too, that I think is that you have time. You know, when you look at, like, I've got 20 years left, or I've got 40 years left before, you know, this is all said and done, or I've got, you know, maybe if you're young, you got 50 years left, right? You've got time to figure it out, but you also are focused. Another thing too is when we make mistakes, a lot of times people can be really hard on themselves, but mistakes are just part of the process of learning what not to do, right? Like Edison said, you know, he did, I don't know, 600 different ways he tried to invent the light bulb. And he said, you know, like, doesn't that get frustrating to you? He's like, no, I just know 600 ways not to do it.
Right.
You know, because he knew it. He knew that it was going to work. And so I think it helps you get focused. I think it helps you have a sense of purpose. And I also think it helps prevent you from making stupid decisions. You know, because really, when you're looking at it from a story kind of aspect, is I'm presented with a decision. If I make the wrong decision or a stupid decision, sometimes the only decision is a stupid decision. We've all been there in our lives. Is, do I want that part of my story, right? And so it prevents you from making dumb decisions, I think. That's probably especially true and important for some of the people who are listening who are a little younger. You know, it makes an impact, you know, and how does this prevent me from being that person that I want to be when I'm, you know, when it's all done?
Yeah. If I think about, if I write my obituary and begin with the end in mind, and I have a sense of, maybe not the details, maybe I don't have all the details, but I have the essence of.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, you don't have all the details, right? Like,
yeah, but I got the essence.
You could get very detailed if you wanted to. What's that?
But I mean, I have the essence of what my life was about, was for. Then I think it's easier to make some decisions, like you're saying, versus if I don't start with the end in mind and all I have is today, and I'm trying to decide, like I'm actually in a space right now where I'm trying to decide some things for myself. And I don't exactly know what path to take. And so that's harder when you don't know what the legacy is. When you don't know, like, oh, what my life was for, then all options seem like they could be good options.
Right.
But of the options, one option might put me closer towards what the essence of my life was about versus the others. And if I don't know what that is, if I haven't started with the end and worked my way backwards, then I don't know. And it makes decision-making in the present even harder.
Right. One of the best word pictures I've ever heard related to staying focused on the important things is, if you were traveling from Seattle to Phoenix and you had a friend that said, oh, hey, I heard you're on a road trip, you should swing by. And they lived in Miami. Yeah. You would not do that. That would be like, that is so far out of my, road trip, out of my plan. There's no way I'm going all the way over to Miami to get from Seattle to Phoenix. However, there's plenty of things that happen in life where we get pulled all the way over to Miami because we haven't ever set a determination or a destination, on that road trip of life. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things with this obituary is you're starting with the end in mind. I know this is where I want to go. Like you said, it's not all of the tiny little minutia details, right? But it's a focused it's a focused discipline.
I think I had this thought too while you were sharing that Miami thing, like, and on the flip side of that, if you knew what the end was, and the opportunity in Miami was in alignment with what the end was,
yeah,
then you could actually make that decision and be like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like normally I'd think Miami, that's way out of my way, but because this is so in alignment with what the end is, man, I'm excited. I'm all in. Like I'll take that detour because I'm clear how it plays with the bigger picture. But anyway, I think it just proves the point even more that unless you know what the end is, it's hard to make those calls.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah. So, I mean, let's say, and a perfect kind of example as to how that works in your life is if you know what your end goal is and all those around you are saying that's a dumb decision and you're saying, no, it's the right decision because I know where I want to go.
Yeah.
Then you can, and you hear that so many times of people who are successful that they're like, everybody told me not to do it, and now in hindsight, everybody's wrong and they're right.
Right.
And so, again, starting with the end in mind is important, and it's kind of macabre, but starting with the obituary is a good place to start.
Yeah, I get it. I like it. Well, if people want to, I would imagine that it helps to have a process to go through this. Yeah. If people want help, support, coaching around this, finding their, not their obituary, but really like the path to this life they're trying to create.
Yeah, really
life plan, et cetera. How do they?
Yeah, really what it comes down to is being able to write out a life plan. And when you have a life plan written out, then you can be more productive on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And when you have your life plan figured out, you're more productive on a daily basis. You can communicate more clearly. Human side of marketing is what we're always talking about here. I think that when you know who you are, when you have your life plan figured out, when you're more productive, you can communicate more clearly to your staff, to your customers. And so to do that, Well-Dressed Walrus, we're going to start a new kind of division of our company called Hero Story. Mm-hmm. And you can learn more at herostory.coach. And really what the kind of the edifice of that is everybody, there's a hero in every story. In your life, you're the hero. In your business, your customers are the hero. Mm-hmm. In your staff and in your business that you run, your team members are the hero. And if you don't know what role you play or where you're supposed to be the hero or where you're supposed to be the guide, then you can be making, losing sales, making kind of poor decisions with staff, or like we talked about last time, living somebody else's story. Somebody else is the hero of your story. Yeah. And so herostory.coach is you can get some more details there about what we're going to be starting to roll out in 2021 related to some personal, some individual, and some group coaching around these things. Starting with your obituary in mind or write your obituary is a definite process. And we have a really solid process of how to do that and how that then translates into a life plan. Very simple steps that I take people through. It's a course essentially to figure that out.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Good. So all of you listening to this, go to herostory.coach to learn more about all of that. Kurt, thanks for always bringing great human sides to this thing called life and business. So good.
Thanks, Chris.